Good morning and welcome to Beneath the Plates. I'm your host, Jared Elrod. Hey, today I want to talk about something interesting, but first I just want to tell you, I probably shouldn't have mentioned this on the podcast, but I'm excited about it. This is probably the last episode I'm recording on this mic system, which I absolutely love this mic system. They're the Rode mics. They're like the quintessential like YouTuber, like little square mics. I've absolutely loved them. And the only reason I'm looking at upgrading, was two reasons. One, I really wanted like Bluetooth to phone, and these were old enough that they didn't do that. And then also my buddy Doug needs some microphones, and he's used these a few times and really likes them. And I'm like, well, I need to get a new pair anyways. Let me just do that. I'll just give you these. And yeah, saves you from having to go out and do all the research to figure out which microphones you should get. So I ordered a new pair, and I went from Rode, I'm going to JVI, which was like originally like, okay, which one am I going to get? It was between the two. And I'm super excited, not just because of the Bluetooth feature, which apparently the audio kind of sucks, so I probably won't even get to use that anyways. But I'm super excited because when I wear a t-shirt, this is like, the two things I don't like about this mic is, one, I can't go directly to my phone on Bluetooth. The new ones will. We'll see if it's going to be good enough quality, but they do it. And then two, these have a clip, which is super helpful and super handy. But if I don't have like a hoodie, which will come up in the summer, I won't really be wearing hoodies, or like a button-up shirt or something like that. So like that's easy to clip. But if not, I really struggle where to clip them. In both of my gym videos or even just like, whatever. So like for these, I just hold it like a microphone, and that's fine. But it is a little bit of a hassle sometimes. And the new ones, well, one, they're like half the size, so that's cool. And then they have like a magnetic clip, so I can literally put the other piece on the other part of the shirt. And if I'm wearing a t-shirt, I can have it, I don't have to have it up at my collar where it like rubs on my neck and does weird stuff. I don't have to like figure out, I don't have to try to wear a necklace to try to hang it from, because I like it to be right about my sternum level. Seems to be the best place for my volume level and clarity. So I'll literally be able to just take the clip part off, put it down my shirt, and then boop, magnet it back together. So I'm really excited about that. And not that that matters a whole lot for this podcast, but I wanted to share just a little happy thing. Maybe that's what I'll start doing. I'll starting these off with something I'm happy about, because that is actually a technique for mental health, motivation, success. Is you write out lists of things you're thankful for, and so I might do that. Whether it's thankful or happy or excited, I might starting off every episode, and then that will hopefully trigger you guys to start doing the same thing. Wake up every morning and think about something you're grateful for, or you're happy for, or you're excited about. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is, this one's going to be interesting. So this one is going to be, I'm going to call this like, cutting slack for those with like a mental health disorder or something. So this is something I've kind of realized recently. As someone with a technical, like a mental health disorder, a mood-altering condition, disease, whatever, and I'm going to say we, because I'm going to just, I'm part of this community, so I'm going to assume that I can kind of speak for us here a little bit, and then kind of encourage us. So we spent a lot of time focusing on our moods, but not just our moods, but like our behavior, right? Now, some of us may fall more on the victim spectrum, probably not if you're watching or listening to this podcast, but more on the victim spectrum where it's like, I can't hold a job. And some of you, like, I get it. I'm coming from a place of like bipolar 2. I know bipolar 1 is a completely different beast and very different experience. Again, this is all about my experience of this and learning to essentially turn bipolar 2 into my superpower rather than the curse, my reason for failure. So with that said, spend a lot of time focusing on that behavior, how we act, how that affects others around us, how our mood is, trying to manage or make sure that like our negative mood or even if you're, manic or ADD, ADHD, right? You're not like bothering others too much, right? And so if it's really bad, then it's typically like, let me withdraw. So I try to manage, I'm sure this is most of us, right? It's like trying to manage, like if if you're, I don't want to speak for someone else. Someone I know and I know has had a couple hard days in the last few weeks, like they have a bunch of like stimming toys. So they're like on the spectrum and they get overwhelmed and overloaded, and just like want to shut down if they get too much, stimulation. So they're, different stimming toys, have these earpieces that help reduce the noise. It's like a reverse hearing aid. I've never tried them, but apparently they work wonders. Different stimming toys, different techniques to try to like calm down. I need to be in public right now when people are being very loud and it's a loud environment, but I need to be here. So different techniques to kind of cope with that. So that way their behavior isn't imposing on the group. I do the same thing where, okay, you've got to, just because you're in a depressive state, or what's the worst is, when I'm depressive with a little bit of mania, because then I'm just irritated and mad at everyone, and all I can see is how stupid everyone is. And so that's like the worst state to be in. And so we manage that, right? But you know what I've realized recently, I've had this realization is, we as people with a mood-altering behavior spend all this time, resources, techniques, money, if you're, on medication, doctor's visits, therapy. I talked about those stimming toys, spending on that kind of stuff. To be able to not impose, essentially to be disciplined, right? So we use an inordinate amount of discipline. We actually become, if you're not one who falls on that victim spectrum and you basically just say, well, this is my reason why I can have outbursts and act like this is because, and everyone else around me has to deal with it. Not talking about that half of people with mood altering. I'm talking about the ones who essentially develop extraordinary discipline to not let their mood altering disorder just spew all over everyone else. And if they do get to the point where they feel like they can't do that, they will then just remove themselves from the situation, from the equation. Okay, I think we established that. Okay, so what I think is interesting though is the average quote unquote normal person doesn't put in nearly that amount of self-awareness and self-discipline. And so it's interesting to me that you'll have people like me I have a mood altering, so like, it's, we're just being real blunt about it. It's not my fault. My mood shifts and all of a sudden, right? And it's like, so that's a hard fight to be like, I'm going to fight against what the chemicals and what all the things my body are doing and the state they're trying to put me in. So like dopamine, and I'm very, low understanding of some of this, but basically it's like, okay, so I'm just gonna use a broad spectrum of this, no pun intended. Like, dopamine is decreased, cortisol is increased, the fight or flight is increased, all the things to make you anxious or aggressive or defensive or paranoid, all these things, right? So you have all these internal things working against you, and you have to just discipline / not just discipline, but the discipline of building up the routines of knowing what to do, blah, 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 right? Like, to still maintain and act normal. But then you'll have a quote-unquote normal person who they get upset about something and they'll just fly off the handle. And like that's just perfectly acceptable because they were upset about something. What? Can we talk about this for a few minutes? And so this is, and I kind of had forgotten about this. Okay, how do I get into this? So, why is it okay for again, normal person, or when I say normal, I mean someone without some sort of cognitive or mood altering type, whatever, they will just go off, right? You see the Karens going off like crazy. You see like coworkers just get mad. And if they're ever like question like, hey, this is not appropriate behavior for the work environment. Well, so it's because they said this and that just upset me and that's my thing. And there's always seems to be some sort of excuse, but it's always something stupid. And even if it's legitimate, like an actual stressor that is a legitimate stressor, it doesn't excuse them, in my opinion, it doesn't excuse them from getting to just like fly off the handle and yell and scream or throw things and throw a hissy fit in front of everyone. And so it's almost like this double standard to where it's like, we can spend all this time to manage, and if it's like, you know what, heaven forbid, you bow out of something. You're like, I'm just not in a good place. I'm not going to go to that. Oh, well, it must be nice just to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to not go to that because blah, blah, blah. The rest of us have to live. No, you don't. You act a fool all the time. Like, you are constantly blowing up, freaking out, having whatever. And so it's almost like this huge double standard. And so part of this, the ultimate is I want to encourage you, if you have one of these things, to kind of feel better about yourself, because even if you do sometimes have a blow up or a meltdown or a breakdown or a mental health day, yes, it can go too far. We can get in the whole victim mentality thing. But like, consider like how other people don't have the same negative like hindrances that you do and still have these issues. So I worked at a school. It was a private school. It was a church and a school, so it was a Christian school. Literally, the two most unhealthy people I've ever met in my life were my coworkers. So it was me, and then I had a coworker teacher who, I don't even know how to describe her, but like, if you upset her for any reason, she would literally go off on you and yell and scream and throw a fit, and never got in trouble because she always had some sort of excuse of like, well, yeah, but they said this. Oh, yeah, but they did this, or this, or that, or right? And it was always just excused. And it was like, how is this okay? And then our boss, who was basically, if you open up a medical textbook and you go to the chapter on narcissism, or you open up like a Christian therapist book and you go to the section on narcissistic Jezebel type whatever, like you'll find their picture. And for 4 years, this is what like every day, you never knew. And almost every day there was a blow up. There was some sort of emotional something because some third grader said something that upset them as a 30-something-year-old woman, and they blew up and freaked out, and it was like, and then would go to great lengths to get revenge and like have, and there's all this insane behavior. And this kind of triggered this because I was in a situation recently that it kind of gave me a flashback, because I was in a situation where a group of supposed grown adults were adulting and lifing, and out of nowhere, because of a little bit of bad news, a little bit of, not even bad news, but a little bit of like an inconvenience was presented. And this person like freaked out. And it like gave me flashbacks, because I was sitting there thinking like, it was like I was back in this other environment. And they were just threw like a tantrum and were like, not quite yelling and screaming, but like a more civilized version of yelling and screaming and like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. This always happens. Why do we even come? Blah, 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 blah. And it was like this whole huge hissy fit. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what is happening right now? And then it got me thinking, and I've been thinking about this. This has been a little while. I've been thinking about this, is like, why do I spend so much time like managing, and I still get crapped on for like, yeah, but he's got bipolar, so you just kind of have to, And so like if I walk into an environment and I'm a little bit like 1% off, like, oh, okay, I know I'm a little irritated today, so I'm going to be a little quieter today, right? I'm going to be a little more reserved. I'm still going to do everything, and then people like always on the lookout. In fact, I had a guy who used to serve, and I found this out later after we kind of fired him. I kind of wished I could fire him again. But and he was like, he would come in and particularly present me with like a annoying or a stressful situation to see how I responded. and then would go and tell everyone else, like, oh, be careful, he's in a mood today. You got to avoid him for the day. And I'm like, how, honestly, I don't know if I can use the, you know what, this is my podcast. Like, how douchebaggy can you get, right? Like, how low can you get to come in and purposely try to trigger someone just so you can get a response, just so you can go around? And so I realized I've spent my life, because even before I knew I had bipolar and I had all this stuff, I knew that, like, you know, I had these issues. I knew I had these emotional issues. I just, you know, didn't know how to call them or classify them. And this is what I've been thinking about for the last few weeks. And it's like, I've spent my life around, like, normal people in terms of they don't have any kind of actual, like, condition, disease, any of these things. But because of just, like, a lack of discipline, get to walk around and just, like, emotionally spew and spill and explode all the time. And that's just considered normal, right? Oh yeah, you know how it is, you know how life is. But then if I come in and I'm a little bit quiet or a little bit short in my answer where it's like, blah, 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 I'm like, yeah, no, we're not gonna do that. I don't wanna do that. This is how we're doing this. It's like, oh, he must be like manifesting bipolarness or something. Okay. Oh wow, he didn't tell a joke at the end of that answer. Oh, he's being a little quiet. We got to be on, you know. But then it's like, it's such a double standard. And this episode has turned out to be a little more venting than I originally wanted it to. I wanted it to be a little more constructive. But hopefully you hear, for those of you who have these things and have to deal with this, you have family members who are like constantly holding you to like this higher double standard. But then, like I said, like your sister can freak out anytime they come over to a family event. But you know, you do one little thing or you have one little opinion, and it's like you're like, no, that's actually, and that's another thing I've encountered too, where they're like, oh yeah, because I was like, no, that's not bipolar. Like, I'm allowed to have emotions. Like, what you did was wrong. It upset me. That has nothing to do with bipolar. Like, that's a normal thing. You wronged me. I can be emotional about this. I can be upset. I still get to be a person outside of bipolar. And it's like, you know, people put you in that box. And so it can be frustrating sometimes when, like, you feel like you're better behaved than everyone else around you, but then everyone else around you that holds themselves to a lower standard are watching you, right, to see, like, are you going to slip up? Are you going to have this? Are you going to have that? And constantly on the lookout, meanwhile, not behaving as well as you are, not having the same disciplines that you have in your life, not having the same accountability, not having the same levels of success and relationships that you have. And it can be kind of exhausting sometimes. And it can be kind of hard. And maybe this is why, like, people with these things tend, you know, one of many reasons why they tend to be a little more of loners and a little more, you know, it lends to the depression and the isolation, because it kind of sometimes feels like, what's the point? Like, you know, oh, I hold myself to this high standard, blah, 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 and then everyone else gets to just be at this lower standard. I feel like this way with my kids too, where we sometimes, like, I don't want to hang out with other people who have kids. And you can say, you know, you can listen to this and say this is horrible and this is whatever, and I need to just not judge people or whatever you want to. You can say whatever you want to say, because you're going to anyways. But hopefully there's a few people be like, yes, no, okay, it's not just me. Like, we put a lot of work into raising our kids. Like, I won't say that, like, it quite defined, well, I would say it defined our life, right? Having kids, it was a thing, it was a responsibility. Now, it didn't, like, direct our lives in terms of, like, no, we can't do that because we have soccer practice. Like, we've had a mission for our lives, and, you know, things like that didn't deter it, but it definitely put a lot of time into becoming better parents, into parenting our kids, walking through them on things, hardest things, teaching them the right way. And then our kids have put a lot into being disciplined, well-behaved. They're still people, right? Like, if you talk to them, they're not like, you know, oh yeah, it was like living with like a military dad. Like, it's not like that. Like, you know, we talk to them and they're like, no, we love our lives, we whatever. We thank you for holding us to a higher standard. because we see people, who weren't, and we don't want, so like we've had those conversations. So unless all three of them, including the 9 who's now 10-year-old, is lying to us, so it's not like we abuse them in a restrictive, like you don't get to live a life sense, but we held our kids to a high standard. And then, people are like, yeah, let's hang out. Let's get our families together. And I'm like, I don't want to. And it's like, because it's annoying that my kids, we spent our lives, and my kids spent their lives not taking certain liberties to live to a higher standard, and then to hang out with you and just to see you and your kids take these liberties. And so it's frustrating when you're around other people and they're taking liberties that you won't allow yourself to take. And I don't mean like, oh, you should just lighten up and you only have one life to live. I mean like bad things, like socially annoying things, or things that are like, we never were the family to like, hey, we're a family, so we're going to put you out. I have a couple of senior pastors who felt that way, but I also had a couple of senior pastors who hired a young couple with kids, and then were annoyed that we had kids. So like that's not on me at that point; that's on them. and so to like be super aware of like how our family is moving throughout the world, and have done that for so many years. My oldest is now 18, and she's moved out. She's on an internship in San Francisco, and then my middle is now in high school. My youngest, like I said, is 10. To have lived that way, and to kind of like a higher standard, and then just to get around others and just to see like, their kids just do whatever they want, or these different things. And especially like when you have people over to your house, and it's like, or in certain situations, and it's like, no, this is not fun. This is stressful because my kids are behaving and not doing these things because they were raised better, but then they have to be around these other kids who are then doing these things. And so then now my kids, one, don't get to do the thing, but then also they're stressed out because they're like, we're going to get in trouble because we were also here. And so a lot of times my kids will even be like, want to remove themselves from that situation, but then they get harassed for like, oh, why aren't you nicer to us? It's like, it's not that we're not trying to be nice. It's like, you're doing things that we don't agree with, and so we removed ourselves because we don't want to get caught in the consequences because we were there with you, guilty by association. Or just it's tiring for them to be around other teenagers who are doing things that, again, are lower than their standard. They're like, no, I didn't do that, and now I don't want to hang around with someone else who is. And it's like, oh, why don't you just, well, you're just too strict. Oh, I feel bad for you. Your childhood must have been terrible. And so, to wrap this whole thing up, is this idea of, like, yeah, it does get lonely. When you try to achieve something, or you try to live to a higher standard, they say it's lonely at the top, and it is really true. And this is a great example of that. This is a great kind of walkthrough of that, because you just get to the point where you just don't want to anymore. When, back to the, the mental health stuff, when you've read the books, listened to the podcasts, gone to the conferences, whatever, adjusted the medications, done the therapy, whatever it is, had the hard conversations, and you can, yes, you may not be perfect, and hopefully, more often than not, rather than blowing up or breaking down, you are mostly just having to remove yourself from a situation because you've done the hard work and, to overcome. And then on the days you really know yourself, and then others just show up and just all over the place, blow up all the time, right? The lady I talked about at the school, like, would literally just make assumptions, go off, scream, yell, and then we'd be like, that's not actually what happened. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, I thought it was. So, okay, never mind then, no harm, no foul. And I was like, you realize you were just yelling at me in front of like 8 different parents that came in and dropped their kid off. So are you going to go back to each one of them and apologize for your behavior and let them know that, nope, Jared didn't actually do anything wrong, it was a misunderstanding? Or are you going to let them all think I did something to you? Oh, no, I don't have to go back and do that. I'm just going to say I'm sorry. And then I would push, and I would say, no, we'd be in these staff meetings where we're having to deal with it. And I would push and say, that's not acceptable. Go back now and tell every single one of those parents. And then break down, well, it's just really hard because my husband's gone a lot, and he travels, and I don't have anyone. And it was just like, and there always was an excuse. There was always something, right? And then they'd get away with it. Because again, the actual leader wasn't a healthy leader. They were the narcissistic, whatever. And they like to be the hero. And so they'd let her off the hook, and then she'd get away with it. And so it gets frustrating. So then when we ended up leaving after 4 years, there was this like attitude of like, how could you leave us? We needed you. Like, you left, and like, we're going to be in a bad... I'm like, we don't even care at this point. Like, don't try to guilt us to make us feel bad that like you needed us to stick around for a couple more years. Like, no. Like, you crapped on us the entire time, right? Like, it's finally time for us to go, learn our lessons, and don't try to guilt trip us. And so this thing like, oh, why don't you come? Why don't you be here? Why don't you hang out anymore? A lot of times it's just that matter of as you're growing and, you're working on your stuff, you might have to find yourself in a new situation, right? You may be, as you're growing, and this is true, honestly, this is true for like recovering alcoholics and stuff too. As you begin to change and other people still think of you as the old version of you, you might have to remove yourself, at least temporarily, from situations, because you go back to family events and they still want to treat you how you were. And you got to prove it to them. I get that. But like, they put you in these situations that are really hard because they're still treating like the old, and it could be triggering, it could be whatever. Sometimes you have to remove yourself. Even in the mental health community. Maybe you have a bunch of friends, autistic, ADHD, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, all these different things, and you start improving. Maybe you listen to the podcast, I mentioned resources, you pick up the book, you start listening to that other podcast or whatever, you're doing the things, the little techniques that I talk about work for me, and you try them, and you start growing, and you start to realize that, maybe I'm not fitting in with my old group of friends as much. I'm trying to be more positive and work on myself, and I go to hang out with my friends, and they want to talk and complain and be negative and crap talk other people, and I'm trying not to do that stuff anymore. You might have to start to remove yourself a little bit. And then we talk about being lonely. It might be real lonely because then you might not be able to go and hang out with normal people either, because you may have some of these other struggles I've talked about. So you might find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, I can just lower the bar, be like everyone else, not accomplish my dreams I want in life, but I can be accepted by others and be quote unquote happy. And by happy meaning, living the lazy kind of like I get to binge watch, 2 seasons of a show on a weekend, and I get to just go and to that birthday party and hang out. I get to go to the pub after work with the coworkers, and I just get to just whatever and give up on the other stuff. Or sometimes it's like, no, my dreams, my hopes, my aspirations, my goals, what I want to do are more important. And unfortunately, sometimes you do have to walk away from some of those things. It can be a lonely road when, you find yourself. So anyways, that's kind of the moral of the thing. Mostly I want to talk about and be like, I want to tell you you're doing a good job, and talk about how like, you spend so much time and energy and even stress and anxiety about like having to fit in and with your condition that makes it hard. And but just to let you know, like, quote, you're like, why can't I just be normal? And I just want to let you know, like, quote unquote normal people, they're not putting in the work. They don't have the discipline you do. And though they may not be triggered 14 times a day like you do with bipolar 2, or they may not be, have the anxiety that comes up 26 times a day that you have to fight down. It may only happen, 6 times a week or 6 times a month. When those things happen, they don't have that same mental and emotional fortitude that you do, because they're not putting in the work that you are, and then they just blow up, and then they just, oh, sorry, and then just want to go back to normal. So I just want to encourage you, you're doing a good job. The work you're putting in, it's worth it. It's not a waste. You are setting yourself apart, but it does come with the downside, the caveat. It is a lonely life. I feel lonely a lot. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, if I should just be like everyone else, or if I could just, be like everyone else. But at the end of the day, you gotta ask yourself, what do you care about more? You get to the end of your life, you get to your deathbed, you get to whatever, right? You're self-reflecting. Do you want to be the person that you saw yourself as? Do you want to accomplish those goals? Make the world a better place for others? Have the family, whatever it is, get the degree, whatever it is that your goal is, that you're trying to overcome your issues, your stuff to be able to accomplish? Or do you just want to be like, yep, I have memories, an endless set of memories of parties, birthday parties, New Year's parties, events. I was invited to all the parties. I was at everything. I have all these memories of hanging out in the break room, talking to the coworkers. Like, basically, do you want your life to look like The Office? And some of you, the answer is yes. Yep. I would be perfectly okay just being one of those dysfunctional office members because I'd have community, I'd have friends, I'd have acceptance, and if I could get that, then I would be perfectly happy with giving up on all my other things to have that. And if that's the case, then, well, one, I don't think this is probably the podcast for you. And if so, I'll borrow an expression, Mazel tov. Good for you. You found something, that's your goal, and that's your thing, and cool. Some of us, we want more, and if you don't, cool. Don't, just like it would be terrible to have ambition and miss out on it because you just did the easy way, it would be equally terrible to not have that same amount of ambition, to have a lower level of ambition but a higher level of contentment, and then basically ruin your life because you watch too many Gary Vee or motivational videos and you're trying to do the things a highly motivated person would be. Well, you could have just been content with the family and soccer practice, coaching the soccer team, washing your car, washing your nice Ford F-150 out on the lawn on Saturdays and hanging out with the neighbors, and cool, man. If that is you, then be self-aware and know that. But if you do have the ambition and you just feel like you're cursed because you have this ambition, but you also have some sort of, mood, cognitive type disorder, it's just going to be that much more work for you, man. Where the average person who has ambition and wants to be successful gets to start at the base of the mountain, and you have to start at the base of the first mountain in the mountain range, right? And there's others. It's not just you. There's others because of, there's socioeconomic stuff, different backgrounds in life. Others who also have to start at all different parts of the spectrum of that mountain range. So let's not look at it as, oh, it's so nice for them to start at the base of the mountain or halfway up the mountain or at base camp of the mountain because of their life stuff. I have to start at the first mountain in the mountain range, 36 miles back. I have all these mountains I have to climb up and down, all these valleys to go through, because you're going to meet many other people along that. And you're going to have other people who aren't even at the mountain range. They're starting on the other side of the country, or they're starting in another country and have to figure out how to get to that country and then get to that mountain range. And you're going to meet all kinds of people along the way. And rather than having a pity party for when you meet someone who's ahead of you and started off ahead of you, instead, just be encouraged, be happy for them, and know that there's others coming up behind you that you can then, pave the trail for, as it were, and help as well. So there's also plenty of people on the way who aren't even trying to climb the mountain that you can just encourage and make their life better as you walk through. There's going to be the little storekeepers and the mercantiles and the restaurant owners along the way on this journey, using this analogy, that just don't dump on, right? Make their day. Improve their life. So with that, that's all I got for today. This definitely went a little different than I was expecting, but hopefully it was an encouragement to you, and just keep going, man. Keep going. You may be down in the valley and thinking like another one. You may have another peak. Man, another one. I just got through a nice peaceful valley. Sometimes the valleys are nice. You get to rest. And you're like, oh, another one, another base of a peak I have to climb. It's the journey. It's your life. And it's worth it. All right, love you. Have a blessed day. I'll see you in the next episode.